with that setup for retail. Courtney.
Hey, Dom. So we've got two Dow components, discounters, and several others that are reporting results next week. And while the consumer has proven pretty resilient in the face of persistent inflation, worry looms that there's a breaking point coming, and investors want to know if maybe it's already here now. So Walmart is getting two price target upgrades today, while the street has gotten increasingly concerned about Target's performance on the flip side. So why? Well, one reason is if consumers are continuing to buy less discretionary categories, or more discretionary categories, I should say, less of them, like clothing and electronics, and then more groceries, that trade favors Walmart over Target. Now, Home Depot is forecasting a year of moderation, but investors might be expecting a little more. Shares actually double the XRT since it last reported. And if consumers are indeed worried about a recession, will TJX and Ross stores potentially see a boost? We got to wait and see. Dom?
All right, so Courtney, one last thing before we let you go. What's the biggest report you're watching next week?
It's got to be Walmart. I mean, Walmart is obviously one that the street always watches to see what's going on with the consumer. They have a really nice cross-section. They also, of course, have their Sam's Club business, which also tells us about an entirely different kind of consumer and helps us see a little bit about what might be going on at Costco. So I think that there's just so many different details that you can pull out of that report, and it often just sort of helps us to understand what might be coming from other retailers going down the line.
All right, Courtney Reagan with the setup there. Thank you very much. We'll see you all next week. Carrie, now you own Home Depot. Bank of America's bullish on it ahead of those results coming up next week, saying the time is to see those trends improve. The time to buy is right now as things start to trough and get better. Do you agree with that call?
Yeah, we definitely do agree with it. The stock obviously suffered when people stopped spending money on building a new deck on their house, which they did during COVID, and started to go to concerts. But that's now passed over the last year and a half, and they're doing a little bit of both. They're going to concerts, but they're also starting to spend money on goods. And we're seeing that across the board. We haven't heard from Home Depot yet, but the stock is up about 17% since the middle of May, and the market's up 5.5%, the S&P, because investors are anticipating that we'll hear something positive. The number may not be great, but the trends may be very good and indicate that consumers are once again shopping at Home Depot. Pros are using the business. We think the product categories are great, and some of the commodity prices have come down, and that would be great for the next few quarters.
All right, so Shannon, what is Courtney alluded to the read-through on the consumer. What do you think we get in terms of consumer commentary next week?
Well, not only do we have all of these retailers reporting, but we've got retail sales too, Dom. So I think we do get a read, number one, perhaps in the earnings to some extent about the relative strength of the consumer and where they're continuing to spend. I think, again, Courtney mentioned it, you know, middle of the store spending, which tends to be more discretionary categories and, frankly, affords better margins and perhaps more pricing power for these entities. You know, that's probably going to continue to come down a little bit. The other thing to look at, Dom, is if we look at the inflation report that we saw yesterday, we experienced an increase in food at home and energy prices. And so both of those categories tend to take away from discretionary spend at big box retailers. So commentary on that will be important. And then the last thing is theft. You know, we've heard a lot about shrink over the last 18 months or so. That is very difficult for analysts to quantify in terms of is that going to accelerate and what are going to be the mitigants for that on a go-forward basis. And I think that's important when, again, we're looking at margins for these big box retailers.
All right. There's a call on the consumer there.